Hello, everybody. This is Kelly Connors, and I am a life work coach. I'm an author, and now I'm delighted to share that I'm also host of a collab for women leaders. It's called Take Time to Thrive, affectionately known as Thrive. So it's a Thrive collab for women leaders and entrepreneurs. And really, it's a platform for sharing your own story and connecting your story to your area of expertise or a passion or an interest that you might have around the area of well-being. And for many years, I've been a life work coach. Before then, I was a women's health care marketer. And my career has morphed, has had several different kinds of iterations, but I've always focused on the opportunity for well-being to be at the core of women's health and women's well-being. So I'm delighted to share this inaugural conversations, 30-minute conversation with Tatiana Epstein, and she is a director at Accenture. And for this inaugural series of Thrive Collab, we're going to focus on her topic, which she is really passionate about, and which has nothing to do specifically with her area of work at Accenture, but it's obviously a core capability and something that really she can share with you about why this is so important for women's leadership and for women's well-being. So the topic today, and for the next 30 minutes or so, is honing your emotional intelligence. So welcome, Tatiana, to the inaugural series of our Thrive collab for women leaders. I'm so appreciative of your sharing your passion and interest. And can you tell us a little bit about who you are, maybe get into your fun fact a little bit, some of your experience, and how you're bridging your right and left brain here?
Yeah, thanks so much, Kelly. And I'm honored to be featured on this, especially as the first one. I think this is great what you're doing, providing a platform for people like myself to share our message, craft our message, and then to get this out to the community of women that we support. So I'm Tatiana Epstein. I live in San Diego. I am a senior manager, which is analogous to director with Accenture, the world's largest consulting firm. I'm coming up on 8 years with the firm, and I can't believe that it's gone so fast. I specialize in supply chain and utility clients. I've worked throughout the US, about 7 different utility companies, so gas and electric power. And through that, I've worked with so many different teams, cultures, different companies. And so being able to flex and jive and respond to different environments is really part of the job, right? It's in addition to all the work product and value that we bring, being a consultant and being in client services, we really need this softer side, emotional intelligence, EQ, to be able to navigate in our careers. And I think this goes well beyond consulting and client services, really into whatever your career path is. This is a skill set that is worth taking time to develop and hone, because you will see the dividends from it. So that being said, the experience I'll share with you today is purely my personal experience. I'm not necessarily educated or an expert in emotional intelligence. I'm still exploring it. As Kelly mentioned, this is a passion of mine. So I would love to connect afterwards if you want to have a discussion or learn more. And then in my personal life, I am live in San Diego, a dog mom, and wife to my husband, CJ. He's a chiropractor, and we are working on renovating our 1950s home. So doing it all DIY, so that keeps us very busy on the weekends.
That sounds like you are definitely a busy woman here with plenty of work, passion, as well as your own interest in renovating a home, which takes a lot of energy. I
Takes a
love it.
lot of energy. It does, and keeps you up at night.
Yes. Yeah. It's something that's, it's actually kind of a fun thing to do, but it can be incredibly stressful too. So anyways, it sounds like you have a nice balance here. And with your husband as a chiropractor, the healing arts definitely are helpful.
Very much so. Yes, I take advantage. Mhm.
So just share with us, Tatiana, a little bit about what's so important, about emotional intelligence, and what is really the biggest challenge you believe women have around this?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think sometimes the term emotional intelligence can be a little daunting or um, almost put us on our heels thinking, well, if I don't have emotional intelligence, am I unintelligent in this space? So, if I had my way, maybe I would just coin this as emotional awareness, right?
Mm.
And this set of skills, kind of on the softer side, really goes along kind of these four areas that I highlight. So, starting with self awareness, we need to be aware of our emotions, know what we're feeling. Is it frustration? Is it anger? Right? Is it sadness or disappointment? Being able to distinguish these within ourselves leads to this next one of self regulation. Once we identify what it is, we don't just want to, react to an environment, right? Whether it's at work or at home, we don't just want to kind of blurt out what we're thinking, what we're feeling. It might not come across the way that we would like it to. So, having the regulation allows us to actually look at our emotions and respond rather than react. So, that to me kind of encompasses what emotional intelligence is, understanding where we are, processing those emotions, and responding in a way that's under control and that we choose to do. The other pieces of emotional intelligence, social skills, communication, and empathy. Empathy is probably one of the most important, but also difficult. It's not something that can be faked. It's not something that can really be trained. It's something that comes from a genuine place inside each one of us, and kind of developed over time. But as I kind of think about the progression of careers, and I did a lot of self reflection recently, um, early on in our career, we are really individual contributors, right? It's the merit of the work that I do, the value that I bring, what is my reputation as I start to move up through my career. And then those of us who get into kind of the first rung of management, well, we've gotten there based on our own merits. And it's this transition that seamlessly happens overnight, right? We get a new title, moving from individual to manager, and we are expected to now manage a team and empower people below us to contribute. And this transition is very difficult. And I think if we just rest on our laurels of being able to deliver good work, suddenly it's not sufficient, right? And so as we develop and mature in our leadership and through our career, we start to realize that there's probably a piece missing. And I think that piece is really honing the softer side, right? Understanding that people, that we don't just have business relationships, right? We have relationships with people in business. Everyone brings emotions to the plate. And so it's important for us to have an understanding and a skill set to handle those. So I would say one of the challenges that I see with women surrounding this is maybe that we don't give enough credence to it. I think in general, women, we can be our toughest critics of ourselves and of each other, right? For whatever reason, I hate to admit it, but sometimes another woman walks in the room and you kind of just, you get not necessarily a negative mindset, but I'm not as outgoing or friendly as I probably should be. And I think if we're honest with ourselves, this happens more often than not.
Mm.
So, if we're already putting each other at a disadvantage, and then we're putting ourselves at a disadvantage, and being overly critical, we're not helping anyone. So I think if we can start to tap into these feelings that we have, either towards other women or how we express ourselves, it's an area where we can progress our career, but also support those around us.
Yeah. And what you just said, that both, it's not either or, it's not progress your career to the detriment of the relationships with others. It's both. And both are necessary. That does take, as you mentioned, some self-reflection to kind of gauge, your own feelings about this. Like you mentioned, when somebody walks in the room, how does your body feel? How do you actually come across? And this does take some self-reflection. So I totally appreciate your acknowledging that. I think that is the key to leadership, actually, this self-reflection, ability to self-reflect.
Yeah.
So with women, you say emotional intelligence is our superpower. Tell us more about this and how we can use emotional intelligence.
Great. Yeah. So this is kind of a stance that I'm taking, that emotional intelligence is our superpower. It's something that sets us apart and gives us a leg up when we are competing with men in the workplace. Now, men can be emotionally intelligent. I'm not questioning that. But I think at the biological level, and from the way that women have been socialized in our society from a very young age, we are predispositioned to having a stronger foundation for emotional intelligence. Mm-hmm. Now, if we think about coming back to kind of the biological and the socialization side, growing up, men are encouraged to be outwardly competitive, more independent, right? They are awarded for being strong and, top of their class. And I think for women, we kind of have a different view, right? We are encouraged to include people, right? Have more play dates, look to kind of that inclusive side, valued more on some of the softer skills. Not to say that we don't strive to compete and do well in school, but I think society and our culture emphasizes different traits in us. Mm-hmm. So as we grow up through this, I think that leads to our kind of foundational leadership styles. So in doing some research, there are differences in men and women in emotional intelligence and in leadership. At the core, men generally are more of a command and controlling, and women are seen more as mentoring and coaching. And I think this goes back to society's views of us, how we were raised, and again, part of our kind of biological nurturing nature. Mm-hmm. So with this in mind, having those kind of softer cues, this is what really sets us apart, that foundation for emotional intelligence. What we're seeing here on the slide is social styles. This is a behavioral assessment trademarked by the Tracom Group. This is not something I invented or came up with. And this is one skill that I use in that first step of emotional intelligence. So self-awareness. This is a behavioral model that I really like because it gives a framework and puts words to how we react. And it also allows us to start to gauge where other people are. And so it really helps us build on our foundation of emotional intelligence, put words to our intuition, to the way that we respond to things. So would you like me to walk through some of these, Kelly?
Sure. Why don't you, is there one that you identify with, and can you kind of hone in on that one?
Sure. And maybe I'll say it, I'll give a little precursor here. So with these 4 styles, these are generalities, and you might see yourself in one of these very clearly, or you might be spread across all 4. And if you're spread across multiple, this actually speaks to your skill in versatility, in being a chameleon, right? Being able to adapt to different environments. But the idea here is, at its core, if we were to leave our emotions unchecked, if we were having the worst day, stressed, hung out, hungry, right, how would we react, right? Mm-hmm. We all have kind of those innate foundation.
Yeah.
The other thing is I think this leads to our leadership style. So when we look at the women here on the screen, these are all powerful women leaders in their own right, and they lead in different ways. So I personally am a driver. And I think a lot of people, when you think about a stereotypical leader, maybe being type A, kind of the controlling, disciplined, this is that driver personality. However, not all leaders are drivers, and you would actually make a mistake in trying to emulate Reese Witherspoon if you more likely aligned with, say, Melinda Gates, maybe more of an amiable, right? So an amiable on the bottom left there is really more relationship driven, cares about how other people are feeling, maybe a little bit more empathetic and charismatic, and leads with a little bit more of a softer leadership style. Whereas the driver is more task focused. It takes more effort for me to remember that there are people involved. And so that's a strength, or that's an area that I have to work on. Whereas the Melinda Gates of the world, that comes second nature. So for Melinda Gates, maybe she has to work on standing up for herself a little bit more, making sure that when she has a contrasting opinion, that she can stand on her own rather than trying to play the balancing stable ground of the group.
And I think
So
that that's a really good point. I'm sorry.
No, that's
I
fine.
think that it's kind of, at least for a lot of women in my generation and my cohort going through the workplace, going through the workforce, rising through the ranks, the amiable has been what we have been rewarded for most of our life, for being the harmonizer, for being the one that lets others go first, the one that, well, the harmonizer relates to others' feelings and processing information by considering how it affects others. So this is really interesting because we think of Melinda Gates actually as quite a powerful woman.
Very powerful.
And so she somehow is using some of her innate, how she was nurtured growing up and whatever, however her personality is, to actually create powerful influence in her life, which is possible. Like, as you said, this is these are kind of boxes that are useful just to as a grounding place. And
They are.
it's all about honing your emotional intelligence so that you can connect with other people that are different from you and what might be necessary, because we're all different.
We're all different, and this is necessary as we progress in our career, right? We're going to be interacting with more people. It becomes more and more of a people business. I think the further along in our career we get, right? We've built the foundation of strong skills, expertise. That's why we're in leadership. And suddenly it's kind of this shift away from actually doing work and now working with people, right? How do we convince people to see the way we see, or get them on board, or move the program in a certain direction, right? That's all people skills. And so understanding what our strengths are, where we come from, what kind of leader we want to be, and then understanding that each one of these four, we do have weaknesses, right? And if left unchecked, for example, for a driver, on my worst day, if left unchecked, I will turn autocratic. I might leave my team behind. I'd prefer to do it alone, right? And I probably move too quickly. Now, I know that because I've gone through this exercise. It's very nice to see weaknesses on a screen. It kind of gives me a moment to detach from it a moment and say,
Yeah,
okay, I resonate with that. It's not my fault that I act that way. Now it's my fault if I continue to act that way. But now I know, right, I need to use my emotional awareness to respond in a more inclusive, maybe slow-paced way than I naturally would.
yeah.
It also makes sure that maybe I have that amiable, on my side. Maybe that's my right-hand man to keep me in check a little bit.
Good point. Right. Is that you don't have to be all things to all people.
No.
It's connecting with your innate who you are, and then understanding that through self-awareness and being able to surround yourself possibly with, if you have the opportunity to rely on other people with strengths that complement yours.
And
And
Kelly, one point on that, I love what you just said, right? We don't have to be everything to everyone. I think as women, we do this so often,
yeah,
right? We want to be a perfect mom, a perfect wife, a perfect girlfriend, a perfect coworker and employee. And we hold extremely high expectations for ourselves.
mm,
And we can't please everyone. And so if we are trying to, be the perfect blend of these four women on the screen, it's going to be inauthentic. We are going to fail and we're going to be well outside of our skis, right? So instead, if we identify where we are strong and where we have confidence, use that as your starting point and then kind of build around it, hone your emotional intelligence to try to work on those areas that are a little bit rough, right?
yeah,
But come from a place where you are confident that you don't have to force yourself to be a certain way, right?
right.
This is innately who you are. Just be that unapologetically, and then kind of soften the edges so
That's
that you can
great.
get along with more people.
That's great. I think that's a nice way of putting it, soften the edges. And it comes from, when you talk about thriving, it really comes from an ability to have self-compassion, that there's nothing wrong with you. You are enough. This is simply a framework for further self-awareness, which is part of your journey. This is just a human journey, no matter what you do in your role. It's not only because you're a director, or only because, someday when you get to be a VP or CEO, this becomes important. This is the journey. This is the journey.
Indeed. Yes, it is. Yeah.
So I think
Um,
you can talk a little bit about that. I think I guess the best day, worst day is kind of interesting how that
mhm.
changes.
So this is kind of my quick and dirty way to quickly assess where you are, right? On our worst day, our worst day at home and our worst day at work is going to be different. So it might be a different answer here. But again, for me, if we look at that driver, right, I turn autocratic. I don't listen. Maybe I'm impatient, right? If I was left to my own devices, that's how I would react. Now, obviously, that's not going to elicit a very good response, whether it's with my husband or at work. So I need to be aware of that, right? And kind of temper that. So my advice is, when you're looking at this, look at your worst day and look at the traits of the four and see if one of them speaks to you, because this is most likely that kind of innate foundational level. And then again, based on your environment, the situation, your skill and versatility will allow you to flex. But really, right, if we let all hell go loose, which one are we going to end up acting like?
Yeah. Yeah. Sort of the default.
The default.
The
Exactly.
default mode is probably under worst day. And then when you
Yes.
make these choices through self-reflection and self-awareness, you can get on your best day. It's a shame is when you don't realize it's your best day. You're really having a good day. And this is actually, you're working in your sweet spot. You're right in there. You're right in there. There's nothing wrong.
Exactly. And everyone's best and worst day are different. So it's important not only to look at this for yourself, but also, so for example, my husband's an amiable. So if you look at his first day, if we're both stressed, right, I'm going to turn autocratic and make the decisions, and he's going to become more reticent, going
Mm,
to get quiet and more reserved. And I could take that as he's not interested, he checked out. Whereas for him, maybe he's feeling threatened and confronted, and it's really uncomfortable. So this has actually given us a framework to say, well, why do you act like that? Right? I
mhm.
understand we respond differently. And so at work, when I'm giving feedback that's uncomfortable and someone immediately attacks me, well, maybe they're a little bit more on the expressive side, and I need to hear their emotions a little bit more, give them the space.
Mhm.
Um, if they start to explain it away and give, you know, past examples of where they did something different, well, maybe they're analytical, and instead of coming across as more emotional, I need to be more fact based in
Mhm.
my feedback giving,
Mhm.
right? So this framework allows how I tailor my message to my employees and how their reaction cues me into how they process and react to information.
Yeah. Well, this sounds like, kind of some of the work that I'm involved in the area of mindfulness. It really requires kind of, one of the tenets of mindfulness is detachment, not being so attached to who you think you are in your role, but being able to, the empathy comes through when you're able to detach from your own rightness and to be able to connect with other people in areas that you might not normally think are necessary or right, or you may have some judgment on it, but to use that kind of detachment to open up to possibility. And I know that's well beyond what we're talking about here, but it's like a skill of detachment is so key to be able to fluidly navigate this.
Yeah. And I kind of, I call that checking your ego at the door. Right.
Right.
Yeah, definitely part of emotional intelligence for sure.
So looks like here you're going to be able to help us tailor our actions to fit the preferred mode, or the preferred mode of the person that we're connecting with or in relationship with or having a conversation with. Show us
Exactly.
tips around this. This looks great.
Yeah, I would be remiss if I didn't give you guys a little nugget to walk away from. So my advice would be take a look at those social styles, see if you can identify where you resonate, use that best worst day, and then also use that to start to guess what kind of style someone else is. So for example, I might take Kelly as my example and start to form a hypothesis, right? How has she been asking me questions? How does she respond to things? For example, maybe I think Kelly is an amiable. So in my next interaction with her, I can use this matrix to start to relate to her on terms that are conducive to the way that she responds. If I came in with my driver and said, let's get down to facts, this is what it is, that might not jive well. So I can use this matrix. So I go driving all the way across to amiable, and it tells me that I need to slow my pace and focus more on relationship. So instead of jumping into a meeting, outlining agenda, objectives, and getting right into it, I might spend a few minutes just trying to get to know her, asking how her weekend was, having a little bit of that relationship basis before we get down to work. And over time, you might elicit a stronger and deeper relationship with that individual.
And more likely the driver that comes through will have the softer, it's perceived as a softer edge to it because
Exactly.
you've developed the relationship and there's a feeling of trust. And I think that's really what you're doing here. You're showing us different ways to connect with others that are different. You're giving us tips on how to connect with our recipient to be able to build trust. It's not to become like them. It's to be able to have a trust component, a trustful relationship.
Absolutely. Yeah, that was a great explanation, Kelly.
So thank you for sharing that with us. And this is when I think about like what is your hope or vision for women in leadership and well-being today?
This is a great quote from Maya Angelou, and I truly do believe it. Talking about people will forget what you said or did. They will forget your work product. They will forget that you closed that deal and that you had top sales goals for the year, but they will remember how you made them feel, right? They will remember that you were there to support them, that you took time out of your day on a weekend to check in on them after that rough Friday meeting, right? Those extra steps, that show of empathy, the support and development, this is what people will remember. And so my hope for women leaders is that you walk away from today with the confidence that you have the foundation of this superpower, of this special skill that sets us apart from men, and that we actually start to use it, right? That we find credence in this. And if we're going to be self-critical, compare ourselves to others, bring emotional intelligence into the equation, right? Bring it in and it will give you that leg up. And so having empathy, understanding our emotions, being able to self-regulate with our teams and our coworkers, this is how you will be remembered. And this is how I hope women leaders think about how they approach their teams and their career moving forward.
Thank you so much, Tatiana. That was great. I'm so inspired by your vision and by the opportunity to have you here on Take Time to Thrive. I think this is a perfect way to kind of actually set a foundation for thriving, because a lot of thriving does come from our emotions. It comes from knowledge, emotions, and it comes from our ability to actually get out of our comfort zone and kind of expand into what I call our courageous zone. So thank you so much, Tatiana. This was terrific, inspiring. And for all the listeners who are downloading or listening to this, thank you so much for your interest. And please feel free to be in touch with me if you'd like to participate as a speaker on the Thrive Collab, or if you'd like more information and to be regularly updated. I look forward to connecting with you and to sharing more women leaders around the topic of thriving in the workplace. Take care.
Great. Thank you so much.
Bye-bye now.
Bye.